record also in Japanese, so that if possible, could you set me as co-host? Maybe if I'm co-host, I can record in Japanese.
Okay, it's assign Selo-san to be a co-host then.
Okay. See. Okay, I will allow to Selo-san to record the discussion.
Thank you.
Okay. Done.
I could do it. Thank you.
Shall we start? Okay, Anna, go ahead.
All right. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, or wherever you are. So welcome to our public discussion entitled Multi-Stakeholders Dialogue, Building Robust Solidarity with Migrant Workers in East and Southeast Asia. So to give you an introduction, I am Anna. I am currently the Social Media and Communications Officer of BBC, and I am your host for this afternoon's session. So to give you an introduction again, so this public discussion is a part of Cross-Regional Youth Academy on Migrant Rights. It is an project or an initiative from the BBC and HRWG with the generous support of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation. So to give you a recap, this public discussion is the highlight of the first day of our youth academy. So yesterday, we had our film screening entitled Migrant Worker Stories. The news won't tell you. It is about the stories of the migrant workers, Indonesian migrant workers in Hong Kong. And we had a little discussion with the speakers that is shown in the poster. So this event is also being live streamed in BBC YouTube channel. So you can go to youtube.com and search for BBC, and it is currently live streamed there. So to start, I will introduce to you Mr. Itsu Adachi to give us the opening remarks.
Thank you for your kind introduction. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. My name is Ida Adachi, the Executive Director of Sasakawa Peace Foundation. It is my great pleasure to warmly welcome you to this public discussion entitled Multi-Stakeholders Dialogue, Building Robust Solidarity and Migrant Workers in East and Southeast Asia. First of all, I'd like to express my sincere gratitude to the speakers today, Ms. Amy Lesadi from International Migrant Alliance, Ms. Wasini Pavipulapap from WorkPoint today, Ms. Junko Watanabe from Nishimura and Asahi Law Firm, Mr. Judah Nugraha from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Indonesia, and Ms. Mariko Hayashi as our moderator. In addition, please allow me to express our congratulations to the participants of Cross-Regional Youth Academy on Migrant Rights, which has just started today. Today's Multi-Stakeholders Dialogue and this academy are organized by BBC, Better Engagement Between East and Southeast Asia, which is a cross-regional initiative to build a stronger network and collaborations among civil society and individual actors in and from East and Southeast Asia to advocate for the migrant human rights. Please allow me to express my sincere gratitude to the Secretary at BBC, which is hosted by Human Rights Working Group, led by Mr. Muhammad Hafiz, Mr. Lafendi Jamin, and Mr. Daniel Rigula. Our foundation, Sasakawa Peace Foundation, has very close partnership with Human Rights Working Group for many years. may I tender their trust with us and their professional and dedicated works. 1.5 years have passed since World Health Organization WHO declared the COVID-19 pandemic. Borders were closed around the world. People's movement and economic social activities were severely restricted. Everything surrounding us has changed dramatically. In Japan as well, migrant workers, including technical trainees, intern trainees, and international students, have been restricted from entering and leaving the country due to the pandemic. Those migrants have stranded on both the Japanese side and the sending country side. Business corporations planning to accept migrant workers have been suffered from labor shortage. Migrant workers, many of whom are non-regular workers, are still facing a number of difficulties in their lives due to the drastic salary cuts and layoff. These situations were important wake-up call to every one of us, telling us, especially firstly, how our convenient lives, societies, economies, and industries have heavily relied on the migrant workers. Secondly, how migrant workers have been placed in a institutionally and structurally vulnerable situation. And thirdly, how its economic and social costs have been put on migrant workers and their families. Now, this unprecedented crisis brought by the pandemic could be an opportunity for changing the society. Some Japanese media featured the activities of migrants helping each other and civil society organizations supporting migrant lives. From this case, we could see resilience of migrant communities and solidarity of and with migrant workers. I would like to believe that Asia has a potential to overcome the crisis by strengthening its robust social capital and networks, while respecting diversity and inclusiveness and helping each other. I think the proof is that every one of you gathered here today. The problems associated with the international migration cannot be solved by one person, one organization, or one country. However, if the stakeholders across region bring wisdom and work together, it will be possible to change it even little by little. The Sasakawa Peace Foundation will do its utmost to contribute to the improvement of migration programs in Asian countries, and at the same time consider the responsibilities of Japan as an emerging destination country. Today's public panel discussion is joined by the experts from the civil society, media, business sector, and the government representative to discuss roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders in advocating for the rights of migrant workers. I hope that today's discussion will be a major step forward, strengthen the platform for dialogue between key stakeholders in Southeast Asia and East Asia, and stimulate discussions on these issues and solutions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, sir, for the wonderful opening remarks. So for the information of everyone, this public discussion is going to be in English, but we have a Japanese translation here in the Zoom option and there. So now we'll proceed to the public discussion proper, but before we proceed, we have first to introduce our speakers here. So here are our speakers for this afternoon. We have Ms. Annie Lestari, the chairperson of International Migrants Alliance, Ms. Wasini Pabuprapa, I'm sorry if I pronounce it wrong, digital journalist from point today, Ms. Junko Watanabe, lawyer from Nichimura and Asahi, and Mr. Judah Nugraha, Director for the Protection of Citizens and Legal Entities Overseas, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Indonesia. This will be moderated by Mariko Hayashi, the Executive Director of Southeast and East Asian Center. So I'll hand over this floor to Ms. Mariko.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the introductions. And thank you very much, Adachi-san, for very warm welcoming remarks, and Sasaka Peace Foundation for its generous support for us to be able to have this conversation, and of course for Human Rights Working Group for hosting the Secretariat of BBC Network and providing enormous support in organizing these public discussions and cross-regional Youth Academy on Migrant Rights, which this panel discussion is a part of. I think I've been introduced a little bit by Adachi-san, the background also. But BBC stands for Better Engagement Between East and Southeast Asia. It is a network of organizations and individuals advocating for rights of migrants in and from East and Southeast Asia, as well as cross-cutting intersectional human rights issues in the region. So may I please introduce myself. My name is Mariko Hayashi, and I currently work as the Executive Director of Southeast and East Asian Center, or SEAC for short. It is a civil society organization led by and for migrants, refugees, and people seeking asylum from East and Southeast Asian countries in the UK. But I was also a program officer of Sasaka Peace Foundation until 2 years ago, where I began to work with Human Rights Working Group on advocacy for migrant workers' rights in ASEAN and beyond, so which led to the BBC initiative. And I'm very, very grateful for Human Rights Working Group and the Sasaka Peace Foundation to allow me to continue working with you on this work, and excited to see it's growing little by little. And today we are joined by prominent speakers representing different sectors, migrant rights, civil society organization, the media, business, and the national government, to discuss how multi-stakeholders can build robust solidarity with the migrant workers for protections and promotion of their rights. So we will first hear from each speaker before we go into the interactive discussion. And questions and comments are welcome using a chat box or Q&A section. The secretariat will help me to monitor the question. And after everybody or the speakers speak, we will invite all the audience to join as a panelist so that we can have a more interactive discussion. So I'd like to move on to invite the first speaker. Eni Lestari. Miss Eni Lestari is an Indonesian domestic worker and a migrant rights activist based in Hong Kong. She is the current chairperson of the International Migrants Alliance. And among many others, she is also the spokesperson of Asian Migrants Coordinating Body and the coordinator for United Indonesian Migrants Against Overcharging, or PILA. And Eni has been so supportive of BBC Network initiative since its beginning. So thank you very much, Eni, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariko. So again, I would like to thank BBC and also the Human Rights Working Group and also Sasaka Peace Foundation for giving utmost concern and importance on the discussion for the welfare and the right of the migrant workers in the region. I really feel that you are really giving more attention, especially during this pandemic, in time that the issue of migrants has been left behind by many parties. And then less people are talking about that. And I'm very glad that you are really putting forward a lot of programs that will ensure that migrant workers, the concern and the voices of the migrants will always be in the agenda within the government or other regional or even international institutions. So I have a slide to share. So what I would like to discuss today is really the challenge of the grassroots migrant workers' participation at migration policies and agendas, as we believe this has become very important when we discuss migration and migrant workers' rights, and especially in the region, that has really been denied. To some extent, maybe left behind, but most countries are really denying this kind of the rights, the basic political right that we should have as a migrants and as community, as sector, and so forth. So now, when I talk at the United Nations in the opening of UN Assembly on Large Movement of Migrants and Refugees, this is one sentence that has been the key message and the very reason that that opportunity, speaking in front of the world government, become one of the milestones, because for the first time, the United Nations invited the grassroots refugee and the grassroots migrant to speak about ourselves. In the long history of the United Nations itself, when they call export, or they will invite, whenever they invite NGOs or international NGO, they are usually referring to the international existing NGO, like Oxfam, mention it. There are many Amnesty International, which is okay. But what has been missing in many of the reports, in my observation, is the human side of the migrants themselves. A lot of that about data, a lot of that is about, statistics, or maybe like statement of facts. But I think none of that statement are really representing the actual aspiration or the reality, or what do we want as a community. So when we had that 3 minutes or maybe 5 minutes opportunity, IMA really wanted to just give one major message, which is don't talk about migrants without migrants. This is a message across elements and across countries that we want government, any other stakeholder to remember that we are present, we exist as community. As we know that the worldwide today, there is 270 million migrants worldwide. And Indonesia, for example, we have around 9 to 10 million, according to the World Bank. And for many decades, since 1970s, we have been backbone of development in many countries, from sending, receiving countries, and even transit countries, where the refugees are transiting and they are staying for many years. They are also somehow, of course, not legally recognized. They are also taking employment that actually support the economy of that country. And then we have also been frontliners of basic service sectors, from agriculture, maritime, construction, hospitality, domestic worker, nurses, or caregivers, and many others. So we have been really in the frontliners of many service industry in many countries. And even within ASEAN, the economy itself really heavily relying on the presence and contribution of migrant workers. So this is already a fact that migrants should not be left behind, and our voice should not be denied. And that the very simple expectation we have is that please talk to us when you talk about migration and migrants, because we are the migrants. And then beyond that, despite our contribution, most migrants experience various forms of exploitation and human rights violation at all stages of migration. I don't have to name this. I'm sure each one of you, when you go through the online, available literature, you will find a lot of horror stories, from human trafficking, smuggling, even simple exploitation of unpaid wages, denial of rest day. Now, during the COVID-19, it's getting more serious, with us being denied even mask, sanitizer, proper accommodation, financial support, and we are being stigmatized in many countries as the coronavirus carrier. So many of these policies also are reflected from that kind of stigma. Many government in host countries, even within Asia, they do not include us in any of social benefit that the local receive or the other resident receive. They give cash, they give food, they give voucher. We get nothing, not even a mask. If you are lucky enough, you will have a mask, at least sanitizer and a mask. But most countries do not put us in that kind of beneficiary. So this is one of the expression how left behind the migrants are. not, when we have to work, we are there. Even during the pandemic, when everywhere is locked down, we are there to work. Factories doesn't close down. The farm is still there. The domestic worker, caregiver, everyone's still working. Well, everyone is actually working from home. We are not. But yet, when it comes to benefit and protection, again, we are really left behind. And then we are also the main stakeholder in migration agenda or migration business or whatever you name it, that impacted by all the policies and regulation of government, even the businesses operation at local, national, regional, international. So yes, we have a lot of things to do with the development agenda, with the WTO, with any kind of international bodies that talks businesses. There, we need to also be involved. So IMA has been trying to assert our space in that kind of international platform, not only within the United Nations, but in even the WTO, IMF, World Bank, and so forth. We are trying to engage. Why? Because whatever they discuss, they will still talk about remittances of migrants. They will talk about employment, which most of that kind of space usually are the migrant workers. So yes, we have to know all the businesses in relation to migration. Now, what are really the hindrance of migrants to speak out or even, be part of the discussion on migration? So I will talk on the micro level, which is more on the policies, both in host countries and also in home countries. So in host countries, for example, many countries do not recognize freedom of association. Name it Malaysia, Singapore, or even Brunei. I mean, they don't even recognize even to their own citizen, right? All the more with the migrants. So there are countries that allow right to association like Hong Kong, Taiwan, Korea, and Japan. So to some extent, it is very natural that many countries do not have even, formal organization of migrants because they themselves do not recognize this kind of right. Even when there are countries who recognize the right to association, but not migrants will be able to even form their own union. Why? Because of the second issue, the nature of our employment. The domestic worker, caregiver, construction, agricultural, seafarer, we are highly isolated. Domestic worker, caregiver, we work individually. And yet, even if that country allows freedom of association, our basic right to day off, right to working hours, right to, food, and even simple type of right is not being legalized because most of the domestic workers in particular are not included within the labor ordinance. And that really explains why most migrant workers within Asia and Southeast Asia, the women domestic workers, are not even able to have a day off. And therefore, they will never be able to form any organization. And even those construction, agricultural, seafarers that work in a big number, but again, forming union, there are a lot of hindrances to that. Most of them are not, do not have even experience of forming union back home. And yet to form a union in that country, there are a lot of legality that we have to fulfill. Given your experience in Hong Kong, out of many, many organizations, maybe more than 200, even among Indonesians, there are only less than 10 organizations registered under Hong Kong government policies or regulation. Why? Because for you to register a union or association, you should have an office, and we don't have money to even hire one. You should have legal supporter like local people, and then you also have to be legal migrants because you have to submit all your documents. So undocumented migrants completely will not be even recognized, and even you should have even special fund for you to be, like a bank account, for example. So that kind of legality really become the main issue. We cannot even register. And also our visa is very temporary, 1 year, 2 years. And there is a issue of long sustainability and also no right of permanent residency. So most of our leaders or members only stay 2 or 3 years and then they are gone. And then we are beholden to one employer or company with no or limited right to change employment. That means if your employer doesn't agree for you to form a union, that will be the reason why you are being terminated. So that also become an issue. And also many of the host countries also outsourcing the system of labor migration to the private agencies. Most government like Hong Kong, Taiwan, and so forth, they just leave it with the agency, up to them, who to recruit, how to meet the employer, what kind of information given to the employer, for example, is up to them. So this has also become the issue why we are really beholden to the recruitment agencies, and employer also know nothing except what the agency has been telling them. So this kind of ignorance is actually created by the very system which is the outsourcing. There is also issue of union busting in the case of Korea. The exclusion by the local union because migrants are not treated as a local workers. So there is really issue of discrimination because the local union do not consider migrants as part of their local workforce, and also issue of stigma and discrimination. So in terms of home countries like Indonesia, Philippines, Bangladesh, for example, what are the issues? Most of these countries do not consider us workers in their home countries because we are very far. So we are overseas. So we are not even there. Yeah, we are not like the factory workers, for example. And also most countries also do not ratify C-189 for domestic work protection. And therefore, most of the women migrant workers who are domestic workers will not be recognized by our own government. And also many of the government only rely to the association or union of the written migrants back home, but the number is very small and they are not up to date to the current situation of migrants overseas. And then we are also excluded from the labor ordinance of our home countries. And therefore, most of, like in Indonesia, even in the Philippines, there is special law only for the migrant workers. And some of them are very, very unclear. For example, what are the relations between migrant workers and recruitment agencies? It is only service provider, but in the actual process, they are our employer. They are the one deciding how much we get money, salary, our right, and so forth. They are the one who decide most of our rights. But yet, within the law in Indonesia or Philippines, they are just service provider. Those we are having difficulties of even filing case against agencies back home. So because of this kind of situation, normally when migrants form organization is always informal and always small scale, 10, 15 people, 50, and then mainly on welfare oriented. That means they are taking care of people who are being arrested, they are taking care of migrants who need food and so forth and so forth. And they are not registered and based on province, religious, hobby, cultural, country, or multinationality. So this is kind of the reality why migrants organizations are always in this kind of invisibility. Now, what are the hold on, what's happening? So what are the difficulties in our participation when it comes at institutions like ASEAN, UN, ILO, even now the Global Compact on Migration? We have tried many times. In fact, even before IMA was established in 2008, we try to put ourselves in this kind of, like engaging, joining, discussing, like joining their meeting, ASEAN meeting, for example. But it's not that easy because to join, aside of being activist, you should also get permit from your employer to even take a leave, maybe 3 days, 5 days, or a week. And then the bureaucracy to even enroll is not that easy. If there is an open application, then you are lucky, you just join. But for you to participate, you have to go with another NGO that is legal and registered. So, as I told you, most of the migrants group are not formal or registered. Then, of course, I can mention my group, but doesn't mean we have a constitution or bylaws or even, license. So the bureaucracy to even participate is already a big complicated issue in our part. And then second issue is language, mainly in English, but not only English. Yeah, I speak English, but the terminology of those meetings are very, very difficult. That's why in our discussion, we have what we call it UN English. We have also ASEAN English. We also have ILO English. Like there are many different types of English, which actually referring to the terminologies being used. And then there also cost of participation. You have to think of the air ticket, hotel, food, and others. If you are not being sponsored, there is no way for you to even participate. Now, lucky because of the pandemic, you can do online. And of course, all these institutions are forced to do it online. But even joining online, you have to go to the different NGO with ECOSOC status, or maybe at least recognized and registered NGO to be part of that meeting. So that is really a big issue. And also cost of communication, because it's quite expensive and most of the migrants do not have Wi-Fi. We use our own, monthly load. So we need also to pay that kind of cost. And also the mobile phone sometimes doesn't support Zoom and different type of video calling. And the time of activities is always different. The United Nations call it like in the afternoon, means early, like early morning in our time. Or sometimes it happens during our work days and our holiday is only Sunday. So that kind of thing, but it's holiday, for most of these institutions. And then also, another thing that we also feel very hopeless, most of the outcome documents do not reflect what we have been telling them, what we have been submitting to them. It's always so far away from our expectations. There's many of even NGO feeling very hopeless when they have to engage in kind of the, ASEAN or UN or other formation, all the more the grassroots. We don't even see hope, engaging with this kind of institution. And then there is no formal recognition to the grassroots organization of migrants by this kind of institution. I told you that if you are not registered, you don't have ECOSOC status, that's all. And also, all this participation also a threat to our employment, if you have to negotiate all the time with your employer, but even with the immigration, if you become activists, they really have a monitoring on you. Korea is one of the example of the union busting. Malaysia recently, a migrant worker was deported to Bangladesh, back to Bangladesh because he spoke at the Al Jazeera talking about his reality, that kind of threat. So, and many more other challenges. And then the last slide. So, what has been our strategy in asserting our right and space in migration agenda and decision-making process? We believe that it is really, in IMA we say for the longest years, for a long time, others have been spoken on our behalf. Now we speak for ourselves. What does it mean? Now that migrants are really organized, whether it is formal, informal, whether it is, small scale or big scale, the fact is we are actually organized. We know our issues. We can explain our issues. We know what we want. So we want this kind of development is being recognized by government, and even all the more by international institutions. So that's why, but we know that this is not going to be easy battle. Unlike the workers, unlike the women where they have the, like major, they have their own legal recognition within the United Nations framework, but the migrants are not even being recognized. They now at least authorize IOM, International Organization of Migration, to handle the GCM process. But yet again, it is not really a major institution that will really legalize the voices of the migrants. So we still find that kind of gap. So in our strategy, in terms of this kind of assertion, we have this kind of 4 principles. First one is be grounded. We are really presenting a fact and reality. Second is be inclusive, that whether they are documented, whatever sector they are from, we include their voices, we include their participation. So we are happy now that we can even send to the United Nations a video message, because of the pandemic. So that kind of practice, something that should be maintained even after the pandemic. And then be visible. That means we really develop inside and outside strategy. We do not give in, even when the outcome documents from the United Nations or ASEAN are very, very hopeless. And we are also be persistent. So that's the reason we are very, very passionate to what we are doing, because we believe that with this power of youth population of migrants, we can make these things come true. And our strategy, we have to, inside and outside. The inside is, of course, I told you, we have to be in partnership with the local NGO or regional NGO or network with the ECOSOC status. So we are, many of us, like myself, is also a member of the regional formation recognized by the United Nations. So then it's easy for me to have an access to the UN. And also, when still there is applied, there is a possibility to apply individually, we apply individually. So the UN now has more system, even within ASEAN, you can always apply as individual group, then we take that kind of opportunity. But again, we have to check who among this group has the time to even, and be allowed to even participate in this kind of forum. And then in terms of outside, we develop forum and protest, of course, online actions, petition, statement, and media is really our friend in making sure all this kind of pressure will reach the government and policymaker. And in terms of the local government, where we are based in now, whether in Japan, even in Hong Kong, in other countries, or even Indonesian migrants with Indonesian government, we are doing a lot of things, including like submitting actual cases and result of survey, and then petition. We also organize protests online, offline with our embassies, consulate. We also organize dialogue. So with Pak Yuda, we are always having this kind of a dialogue in the early pandemic last year, and the press conference. And we also partner with the local NGO back home and different interfaith organizations to help us voicing out our concerns to our own government. So I think that's the closing one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Benny. Thank you very much. And I know Ima for quite a long time, and they've been very, very, very great championing migrant rights, advocacy led by migrants, very, very strategically. And from your presentations, really make us think, how stakeholders other than migrant workers should advocate for migrant rights as allies. What is important is amplifying their voices, not speaking on their behalf. And all migrant workers are the specialists of their own experiences as migrant workers, and they live with it, right? So some people say that marginalized people are voiceless, but I don't think it's true. Everyone has a voice, very, very strong voice, but often there isn't enough space to speak up equally, and space to involve in making decisions that affect their lives. And as from your presentation, you clearly stated that it's not even possible to unionize for many migrant workers, and difficulties for migrant-led organizations even to sit on the table of decision-making or consultations. And I can feel that leading a migrant-led organization now, I really have that experience as well. So how other stakeholders can contribute to create the space and amplify and really listen to the experiences of stories of migrant workers would be probably our next questions. And as Anna mentioned earlier, we had film screening, and I really congratulate Annie and her colleagues and sisters there to create the space for themselves to speak out and tell their experiences, because the mainstream media in Hong Kong did not give enough space to do that. And as we all know, the media plays very, very important role for raising awareness, protecting and promoting human rights and democracy. As this year's Nobel Prize goes to 2 journalists, also one of them from this region, Maria Lessa. So I'd like to invite the next panelist, who is a journalist from Thailand, to share with us the situation of migrant workers in Thailand from a journalist's eyes, and how the media can make an impact. So the next speaker is Watanabe or Ploy. She's a digital journalist and news presenter at WorkPoint News, which is a digital media covering current affairs and culture from a perspective of the new generation. And her recent work on gender-based violence won the Best News Developed from Social Media Agenda Award from Thailand's Digital News Excellence Award. And she's also involved in the capacity building project for journalists to cover migrant workers' issues. So please, Ploy, we'll hear from you now.
Yeah, thank you, Mariko, and thank you everyone that participate in this event or hope that make this event can be realized. I am Wasini Prabhupratap, a journalist in a new agency that based in Bangkok, and I work as a journalist for 3 years, but my work focuses on, civil rights and human rights, and of course, labor rights. So I have multiplied opportunity contacting with migrants or covering them. And today, I hope I can share some of my experience in my profession toward migrants and migration. So I would like to share with you guys in 3 main topics, which are general bias and discrimination, and what's happening during COVID-19 situation, and what are we trying to do next as a journalist. I hope this may cover some topic that would be benefit to you. And if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to kindly ask after this. Okay, so after the previous presentation that focus on broad kinds of migration, I will introduce you to a little more micro kinds of migration by focusing in Thailand. Thailand serves as both an origin and destination. Thai people seek to work in, Taiwan, South Korea, Israel, and also Japan. So Japan is also among the top of the list. And Thailand is also a destination to many neighbors who seek to work in Thailand also. And I try to point out that both Thai who migrate abroad and people who migrate to Thailand are both discriminated against in different ways. But because I write more about migrants who live and work in Thailand, so today I will focus on particularly the migrants who are in Thailand. Okay, so the first point is that in Thailand, like other countries, migrants do not have the right to form unions. And any migrant cannot lead a union according to the Labor Relations Act. As a result, no collective bargaining in the name of migrants is possible. And unfortunately, for numerous reasons, which I shall discuss later, we cannot hope that Thai labor leaders will call out for their foreign counterpart. I'm trying to illustrate how determined the Thai government is to keep migrants under-organized. In 2019, the US government warned the Thai government that they would lose their tax-exempt status on the premise that the Thai government would not allow their workers, particularly migrant workers, to engage in collective bargaining. After that, the Thai government strives to resolve the situation through negotiation. And the US government refused to negotiate in any other way. But, rather than allowing migrants to form union, the Thai government decided to let this tax privilege to be revoked. So they show that, okay, they might accept to lose some privilege in order that the migrants remain unorganized, according to my interpretation. This doesn't seem to make sense, right? But I will show you how bias and discrimination can go. In Thailand, we joke that you can do anything that it could be, and that random thing that you have done, it could be a national security threat. And this pretext is also used in the context of migration also. A governmental officer once asked me how I would feel is one day Thailand become a country with a large number of, the non-Thai citizens. If one day Thailand become the country that majority of the citizen is not originate from Thai. I didn't feel, I didn't tell them that I feel nothing. What's the point of the authentic Thainess? However, it's the security establishment, which I can say that's full of nationalism. They're always concerned about this kind of things. As a result, the legislation to be legal migrants is designed to be very difficult. And in the picture on the left side, this is the picture of the military trying to recruit villagers to be the watcher for them to monitor whether there is illegal migration or not, as shown in the picture. And the military is eager to get involved in migration control. However, I believe that everyone is aware of the story from a decade ago when Reuters, I guess, revealed that the Thai Navy was engaged in human trafficking. So I suppose you all can conclude why military is so upset with spreading this misconception about migrants. This is the prejudice this is another prejudice that has split Thai and migrant employee for a long time, because the myth that one day migrants will finally replace Thai worker and Thai worker will remain unemployed. It has been, reproduced from time to time, and this is the belief that prevents Thai labor leaders from speaking up for their foreign peers, for fear that the migrant worker receiving greater benefits or being able to replace them in the future. But it is not so accurate though, because actually the majority of the jobs that migrant workers do are not the jobs that Thai people do. I think this situation happened in many countries, right? And in addition, Thai's birth rate has been declining for some time, and migrants can, perfectly fill the gap economically. And there is another long-held misconception about migrants in Thailand is that Thai people tend to think that migrants are unsanitary. But actually this fact can be explained by the poor living of condition that they have as a result of their low-paying jobs or a long working hour and so on. And however, this notion has a significant impact on the COVID-19 situation. This image that you see was taken in Nonthaburi just in the middle of this year. It is the image that the authorities installed. As you can see, is a barbed wire fence around a flat lived by migrants after they discover an infection in the building. So it's something that really inhumane, and rights activists have decried this as dehumanization and abuse to people as if they were animals. And of course, we can imagine this happening to a person with higher socio-economical status, even if they are also infected with COVID-19, right? So as a result, this creates a vicious circle. I mean, the authority continue to construct bias through discourses towards migrant workers. Then the media, particularly the widely circulated traditional media, the broadcasting media like television, video, but online media are more from younger generations, so the points of view, the paradigm will be otherwise. But anyway, Thai public mostly reached by broadcasting media, which remain tradition, and this media reproduce those discourses about migrants through their channels, and it reached a really wide audience, the majority of Thai audience. In a result, the public that consume this discourse utilize them to legitimize the government's action. During the pandemic, I will show you, we can saw widely how successful this circle can function. Okay. The first group that faced the discrimination during COVID-19 is Thai laborers who immigrate to Korea, South Korea. We have the exact word to call Thai labor that go and work in Korea. We call them Phi Noi in Thai, which means little ghosts, because from the perspective that they are illegal in Korea and they are unable to reveal themselves in that environment. However, as soon as COVID-19 arrived in South Korea, these Thai migrants went to Thai embassy to request that they need to be returned to Thailand. Otherwise, during that time, the COVID-19 situation in South Korea was really bad. In Thailand was a bit better. So it's a nature the people seek to find a safety rate. But the majority of Thai object their request, stating that the illegal labor status in Korea made it more difficult for others to visit. And in any case, the right groups and their family put pressure on the government to allow them to travel to Thailand securely. However, there's a lot of critique on them. And there are news. It was reported that this worker were said to have escaped from the quarantine facility, and they are blamed with the word like irresponsible or the word like uneducated. But if you can see the picture on the right side at the top, that was the quarantine facility that was prepared for this worker that come back to Thailand. I mean, as you can see, tents and cement, and I am sure that there is no air condition. So we can't expect someone live there for 14 days, right? So that the discrimination towards Thai labor that seek to work abroad, that they also face discrimination back home. Okay. After that is about the discrimination towards the migrants who live and work in Thailand. Many businesses were closed during COVID-19, and some kind of migrant workers are required by Thai law to find new employers within a certain number of days in order to, remain valid under the law. And if their paperwork has expired, they must pay for the swab, the COVID-19 testing themselves. They need to pay themselves because in Thai, COVID-19 testing is not free and it's quite expensive. The renewed document will not be granted without the result of this swab. So as you can see, whenever the registration is more difficult, migrants need to find more money in order to get the paper, and they become more difficult to get registered. So is it natural that there are many migrants become undocumented worker, and they would fall into illegal cycle and become in more vulnerable status? This thing is very bad. Things become worse when the second wave of COVID-19 was in. Things become worse because the second wave of COVID-19 was entirely blamed on immigration. This graphic is from the government, is the governmental infographic, and is stating that, as you can see, finally, COVID-19 case for Thai were 0. And there are people smiling. And this little text saying that, nevertheless, aliens is the word that, Thai governmental body use a lot in order to alienate, migrants worker from Thai worker. They would use the word alien. And this little text say that, however, aliens were 18. So I think this is an example of harmful communication that contribute to, community alienation, separate between the number of the COVID-19 case between Thai and other. The Thai government also invent the bubble and seal policy to avoid further infection. As you can see, this is the logo of the government on the upper left side. So this image was created by the government's COVID-19 Information Center. And they offer two kinds of virus control measure under the word bubble and seal. By the word bubble and seal, they mean to close the factory door and keep all the employee inside. If someone work in a factory, and in that factory spot any infection, the government will order this very factory to close the door and keep the worker inside for a certain number of days. And they would instruct the employer to prepare food and prepare sleeping space for the employer, but the employee can't go out anywhere. They must live in their factory until the day that the government has control is finished. So as you can see, we can track whether there is any violation of rights under the factory during the time that they have to live within this factory. This is the first measure. And the second measure is that, okay, the worker can sleep in their apartment, but they will be tracked 24 hours a day so that their employer can ensure that they did not go elsewhere during their rest time. And in the morning, worker will have to line up in order to take a bus that will transport them to workplace without stopping elsewhere. I mean, it's not quite difference between the choices, whether you would live under the roof of the factory or you can sleep in your own place, but you will be under tracking 24 hours a day, right? I mean, factory workers are the one who first applied the bubble and seal policy. However, the authority shut down all the construction activity in lesser location in the middle of the year, and more than 500 sites, construction sites in Thailand have been cut off as a result. Mostly the workers that live in construction sites are migrants. And we discovered that some locations were left without meals, without food, and even without the COVID-19 testing. So if someone has been infected with COVID-19 in that place, it means that they're just left like that unless someone can notify someone elsewhere. This is how people communicate during the shutdown of the construction site. People that live inside, they need to sleep in this tin roof house. Can we say that? And imagine it's very hot there, and the only way to communicate is to communicate to this little hole. And this is not the employer or the government that bring food and medicine. It's the other people that live near that camp and can't stand the situation and try to provide help themselves. And also during COVID-19, the Thai government promised to vaccinate everyone in the country. They promised that they will get everyone vaccinated regardless of nationality. But in reality is that you will have to register with your ID card code to get vaccinated. As a result, vaccination plan does not cover the majority of the migrants. Currently, the only way for migrants to get vaccinated is for their employer to reserve the shot for them. And in terms of financial plans, despite the fact that every legal migrant in Thailand is required by law to pay social security every month. But what's happening is that the social security fund has already been given financial release for its Thai member twice during the pandemic. But both Thai migrants who are also members of the organization were not covered, even they are naturally the member of this kind of fund. But it will not cover them when it's come to time that they will have to be provided with relief scheme. So actually, I plan to share some more about what we are trying to do next as a journalist. And there are some change in trend in Thailand, but I believe that it would be more appropriate if I could share it on the other route in terms of, the limited time. So I hand it back to you, Mariko.
Are you sure you can just quickly share what you're going to do as a journalist? Or do you want to continue that after the discussion? Okay. Thank you very much, Floyd, for the very comprehensive overview of the situation of migrant workers during the pandemic and how the media also portrayed it. Even the government send the messages that it's not kind of dividing migrants and non-migrants in the process of policy making and also making public announcement. yeah, it would be quite interesting to learn about the capacity building work of journalists, but we'll continue that in the next discussion. So I would like to invite our third speaker, as we time is going to be very short we'll have 1 more hour, so let's move on. So the next speaker is Miss Jinko Watanabe. She's a registered and qualified lawyer in Japan and currently works for Nishimura and Asahi, where she develops a career acquiring experience in domestic and international M&A. She's a corporate lawyer, and she specializes cross-border M&A and joint ventures through her work with the Southeast Asia practice team as well. And after obtaining her master's degree in international human rights law and at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and her secondment at the London-based legal firm in very recent years, she continued to develop her expertise in business and human rights. And she also, she currently works as the external collaborator at International Labour Organization as well. So please, Jinko-san, we'll hear from you.
Thank you for the introduction, Mariko. Let me just share my slides. Can you see this? Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me today. It's a great privilege to join this conversation, and I am so excited to be here together with other amazing panelists today. I've been working as a business lawyer for the last 10 years, and today I'm going to talk about the relationship between business and human rights with a focus on migrant workers' rights. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about 3 points about the enormously important area of business and human rights. When we say business and human rights, simply put, it means that business has to respect human rights of people in the world when they do business. And it includes human rights of migrant workers, of course. So firstly, I'm going to talk about international trend about business and human rights. And secondly, I'll speak about the relationship between migrant issues and business. And lastly, I will explain the current status of most Japanese companies in terms of how they address the issue of migrant workers in their business and challenges they face. Let's begin with the first one. In terms of the international trend on business and human rights, as some of you might know, in 2011, the United Human Rights Council unanimously adopted the United Nations Guiding Principle on Business and Human Rights, so-called UNGPs. It is a current authoritative global standard for both government and business on preventing and addressing business-related harms. And this year, 2021, marks the 10th anniversary of UNGPs. And there has been a huge progress during the last 10 years. This revolutionary framework describes the element about what states should do and what companies should do when they do business. Well, I mean, when business relates to possible human rights risks on the value chain. So as I said, simply put, according to this guiding principle, business has a responsibility to respect human rights by conducting so-called human rights due diligence to make sure that they properly avoid, prevent, or mitigate adverse human rights impacts that could occur through their own activities or through business relationships. So for example, if a migrant worker is working at a factory, let's say in Vietnam, and a Japanese company is contracting with that factory in Vietnam, then that Japanese company has to make sure that there is no human rights violation against the migrant workers working at the factory in Vietnam. And furthermore, if another migrant worker is working at another factory, let's say in Thailand, and then the factory in Thailand has a purchase sales contract with the first factory in Vietnam, then the Japanese company has an indirect relationship with the factory in Thailand. Then in that case, the Japanese companies also has to make sure that there's no human rights violation happening in the factory in Thailand. So basically, this guiding principle imposes a broad responsibility on business. That's a very amazing principle. And it's also becoming a fundamental management issues for companies that conduct international business in today's world. And based on that international trend, Asian companies, including many Japanese companies, are also realizing the importance of the connection between business and human rights. More specifically, there are some reasons that made Japanese or other Asian big companies to rush into this human rights due diligence. Firstly, there has been an increasing pressure from international investors. I mean, there have been a growing amount of so-called ESG investments worldwide. And when it comes to S element of ESG investment, it mainly means human rights. So that means that a company should care about human rights protection when they do business. Otherwise, they can't attract investors. And secondly, there is also a pressure from European countries and the United States through bilateral treaties and international trade policies. Like recently, the United States has a strong trade policy towards human rights violation through the import ban that has a massive impact on Japanese companies and many Asian companies as well. And thirdly, there has been a number of hard laws, I mean legally binding national law, mainly in European countries, that require companies to do human rights due diligence. And when Asian companies do business in these Western countries, they can't ignore the national laws of other countries. As a result, they have to do human rights due diligence in other regions all over the world. And fourthly, especially from this year, there have been some big problems that attract international attention, like coup d'etat in Myanmar and possible suspects of forced labor in Uyghur region in China. Regarding these issues, there has been also increasing attention by media and also from civil societies. And some NGOs in Europe are even starting to sue big companies at their court about being involved in human rights violation that exists somewhere on the supply chain. And these kind of movements directly pose reputation risks on companies. And finally, through the growing use of SNS, young generation's way of thinking is also changing. They are increasingly paying attention to companies' attitudes towards human rights. From my view, these 5 elements make Japanese companies and some big Asian companies more cautious about protection of human rights on their value chains. And the Japanese governments are also very aggressive, especially from this year. They adopted the so-called National Action Plan about business and human rights last October, after the 4 years discussion in Japan. And Japan is the second country in Asia that adopted National Action Plan. And I'm sure that many other Asian countries are also making the same National Action Plan in their way. And this year, in Japan, there's an amended corporate governance code where respect of human rights is expressly written in the code for all Japanese listed companies, by which all Japanese listed companies will have to disclose how they protect human rights to the public. And Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry of Japan also launched a website that provides a useful information about how companies can protect human rights on the value chains. And they also now conducting a big survey on Japanese companies' progress about human rights due diligence to gather information about how they actually implement human rights policy in practice. And not only government, but some members of Japanese parliament started discussion about legislation that would require companies to do human rights due diligence as a legal obligation in a possible future. So what is the relationship between migrant workers, human rights, and business? In short, migrant issue is very, very core issues among other issues relating to business and human rights. When we look into the principle 12 of the United Guiding Principle of Business and Human Rights, as I said, that is the basis of today's whole discussion surrounding business and human rights. And it says companies should pay special attention to most vulnerable groups, including migrant workers. As you know, and as explained by the other panelists, migrants are very, very vulnerable and often put into a vulnerable situation because of many reasons, like being ethnic minority or language barrier, or the status of being undocumented. And of course, the problem of recruitment fee is very particular to migrant workers. So it's a common understanding that migrant workers are very vulnerable in that sense. In particular, about what companies should do when they do conduct human rights due diligence is that they have to respect human rights that are referred in International Bill of Human Rights and International Labor Organization's Declaration on Fundamental Principles and Rights at Work at a minimum. That means they have to protect human rights from, for example, forced labor, child labor, discrimination at work, and they also have to make sure that freedom of association is ensured. And as you may know from other presentation, these 4 elements are very, very relevant to migrant workers. So what specifically companies should do is to investigate their supply chains, and so that they are not involved in this human rights violation in somewhere in supply chain, even though the national law of the countries where the migrant workers are working doesn't protect this kind of basic human rights. And if they find risk on the supply chain, they have to try to avoid, prevent, or mitigate the risk by using the leverage they have towards suppliers or other business partners. For example, if they find brokers or recruitment agents that are hired by the suppliers, then they have to make sure that illegal agents are eliminated from supply chain and not imposing any illegal burden on migrant workers. And in many cases, leading companies, mostly in Western countries, are even paying back recruitment fees to migrant workers on behalf of their suppliers. So in that way, they can make sure that there has been no human rights violation in the value chain. And in order for companies to do that human rights due diligence, they have to work with other stakeholders, and this is so-called multi-stakeholder engagement. And this is very key, and it's emphasized in the framework of business and human rights as well. When they do human rights due diligence, what they can do, what business can do by themselves, especially by only one company, is very, very limited when it comes to human rights violations, as you can imagine. Because in most cases, there are many root causes for that human rights violation, and we also have to work together across the region. And often the problem itself is very, very invisible. So business people can't see what's the real problem and what the background of the human rights violations. So they have to cooperate with other stakeholders. Other stakeholders includes many actors, including local civil societies, local trade union, or local government, or the local branches of international organization. And the importance of this collaboration is emphasized by the United Guiding Principle of Business and Human Rights. In particular, it is very important when business collects data about actual possible human rights risks, because in many cases, as I said, they don't have an access to real voices of each migrant workers who are working on the ground. And they have to cooperate with civil society on the ground. And if they find any risks, then they have to also cooperate with other stakeholders like local government to mitigate or avoid the risks. Finally, what is the current progress of companies and what are the challenges they are facing? As I said, Japan is the second country that adopted national action plan in Asia, following Thailand. When I talk to many Western experts in the space of business and human rights, they express the expectation about Japan to be a leader in this area in Asia. But in reality, many Japanese companies are still in the beginning phase. When it comes to the percentage of companies that conduct human rights due diligence in practice, it is only 30% according to the result of questionnaire survey conducted by Japan Federation of Economic Organization that is conducted in last October, where 70% of Japanese companies already has a human rights policy on paper. So that means that they have a policy as a human rights policy in theory, but in practice, they don't implement it on practice. So what's needed from now on is that they really have to progress their human rights due diligence, not on paper, but on the ground. For example, they have to collect voices on the ground, as I said, and know what a real problem is for each migrant worker on their value chain. But the challenge is most of them still don't have enough information about it. So they can't start thinking about what's the best way for them to do it. And when I talk to many Japanese companies and business people who are in charge of this business and human rights practice in Japan, I found there are many, many challenges they are facing. Firstly, they don't know how to access appropriate network of local civil society as a partner. Secondly, most of them only have a negative image of civil society as an activist doing kind of naming and shaming activities that criticize companies. So they are having like a kind of hesitancy about cooperating with civil society. And I feel like we have to eliminate that kind of bias. And thirdly, in the first place, they don't understand sufficiently about what is really required by United Guiding Principles and why this multi-stakeholder engagement is important and how to do it. As explained by the first presenter, Eni, we shouldn't talk about human rights violation of migrant workers without them. So firstly, we have to disseminate this concept to business people. And finally, based on this limitation, business corporation is now struggling to start a new way of management of their company. As found in many Asian companies, the bigger a company is, the more difficult it is for a company to start a new things, persuading their senior management. I call it the cultural status quo. So the generation matters in that sense. And these challenges make it very difficult to cooperate with civil society and other stakeholders, unfortunately, at the moment. So my suggestion and my aspiration, as well as my passion, is to bridge the gap between business and civil society and other stakeholders. And in order to do that, the power of media and the power of government is also crucial. I've been trying to disseminate the best way for companies to conduct human rights, including the importance of multi-stakeholder engagement. But it is immensely helpful if there is a strong message from media people and a clear guidance and clear message from government as well. This is a time we have to work together more than ever in this devastating situation of the pandemic. And in order to do that, everyone, including business people, each person in business world has to do what each of them can do to make a change. So in conclusion, networking, and collaborating across the sector and across the country is very, very key. And I want to emphasize again, we really have to work together to make a real difference in this world. I leave it here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jinko-san. Thank you very much. Really a comprehensive overview of the situation of business and human rights kind of development in Japan. And also thank you for sharing the honest kind of, challenges that lie there. And I also appreciate your efforts to, or you understand the work of civil society and your efforts to kind of bridge the gap between businesses and civil society. So thank you very much. I'd like to invite next speaker, our last speaker, Bapak Yuda Nugraha. He's from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs Indonesia, been serving there for 20 years and have been leading the protection of Indonesian citizens and legal entities overseas since 2017. And his previous roles include the first Secretary of Indonesian Embassy in Kuala Lumpur and head of section for UN Development Organizations, Directorate of Economic Development and Environmental Affairs. So please, please, Pak Yuda, we'll listen from you as well.
Thank you, Mariko. First of all, I would like to express our appreciation for BBC, Human Rights Working Group, as well as Sasakawa Peace Foundation for organizing this very important meeting. I firmly believe that this open dialogue will always be beneficial for us to promote better understanding for each stakeholders, be it government, civil society, and also, most importantly, migrant workers themselves. As Bu Eni said, that the voices of migrant workers should be heard when we are discussing about them. So in this opportunity, allow me to share what Indonesian government has done, especially Ministry of Foreign Affairs and all Indonesian mission overseas to provide protection for Indonesian national, especially the migrant workers. Allow me to share the presentation. So I would like to start my presentation by showing this figure to all of you. I think we have already aware about the magnitude of the COVID-19 for the last 2 years. So as at today, more than 239 million confirmed cases all over the world, and more than 4.8 million cases of death. And I would like to share also what happened to Indonesian overseas, living overseas, especially the migrant workers. So every day we make a database. We collect the data for all of our Indonesian mission with regard to the Indonesian national get affected by the COVID-19. So up until today, there are more than 5,900 confirmed cases of Indonesian national overseas, 667 under treatment, more than 5,000 recover, 448 death cases, and all those cases happen in 97 countries and 41 vessels, especially the cruise vessel. So I must say here that all Indonesian mission, we have more than 128 Indonesian mission overseas that having responsibilities to provide consular assistance. All of Indonesian mission are affected, and have a responsibility to provide better response for Indonesian national getting affected by COVID-19. And to give you the picture about our challenges, this is according to our database. There are 3.1 million Indonesian overseas, living overseas, and more than 90% of them are migrant workers. But I have to make a disclaimer in this regard. These numbers is actually Indonesian national who are registered in Indonesian mission. In fact, there are many Indonesian nationals who are not registered themselves to Indonesian mission. So if you are asking me how much the real number, how many Indonesian living overseas, I don't have the number actually. But the World Bank in their report in 2017 predict around 9 million Indonesian migrant workers living overseas. So there is a discrepancy of data. So this is kind of our challenges when we are providing protection for Indonesian migrant workers, because sometimes we don't have the data. We don't have the data. Most of them didn't register to our national Indonesian mission, but most of them also, because they are going overseas through illegal channel, they have not been provided by proper information about the role of Indonesian mission to provide protection for them. So many of them didn't aware about the existence of Indonesian mission overseas that they have responsibility to protect. And this is, again, I would like to show you about the magnitude of the cases during the pandemic COVID. As you all see, the statistic actually before the COVID-19 start in 2020, the number of cases of Indonesian overseas, especially the migrant workers, is increasing over time. Yeah, but during pandemic COVID 2020, the number of cases doubled. Yeah, in 2019 we handled around 24,000 cases all over the world, and in 2020, yeah, the number is double. We handle more than 54,000 cases, and the resources we have in Indonesian missions, all Indonesian missions overseas is static. Yeah, the number of staff, the number of budget is quite stable, but the number of cases is increasing dramatically. So this is kind of challenges we face. And this is, we register according to report we receive from migrant workers and as well as our colleague in Indonesian mission. There are at least 4 types of cases faced by migrant workers during the COVID-19 pandemic. First, of course, being affected by the COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, about more than 5,900 Indonesian national being infected by COVID-19, and in this case, we have to provide consular assistance for them to get access to health facilities in a country of destination. Of course, with cooperation with local authorities. And second case is the Indonesian national who are stranded overseas due to mobility restriction. As you are aware that many countries close their airports as well as the seaport for foreigners, and this caused many of Indonesian national, especially migrant workers, cannot go back to Indonesia, especially for migrant workers who have finished their contract. When they want to go back home to Indonesia because there's no transportation provided, then they cannot return to Indonesia. And it's and this is happen in many Indonesian migrant workers, especially also the Indonesian seafarer and also Indonesian fishermen. The second type of cases is employment cases. Yeah. Many Indonesian domestic workers, especially in Hong Kong, in Singapore, Malaysia, because their employers, yeah, working at home, yeah, so they stay mostly at home. Then the migrant workers, the domestic workers, have to work overtime. Yeah, and then there are also cases of unpaid wages because economic situation faced by the employers. They cannot pay the wages, as well as the termination of contract. This kind of cases also we register, happen in many countries. And lastly, about occupational health, when the domestic worker have to clean the house, and then they have to use dangerous substance excessively, this will affect their health. And then last type of cases is Indonesian national being affected by lockdown policies. And we understand that this kind of policy is important for restraining the spread of COVID-19, but for Indonesian migrant workers, especially the undocumented one, and especially the migrant workers who having a job with daily salary, daily wages, because they cannot going out for work, and this kind of lockdown policy severely affected their livelihood. And this is the role of government during the COVID-19 pandemic. First is about evacuation. In this regard, we have evacuate our Indonesian national from Wuhan, the first epicentrum of COVID-19, and as well as from the cruise ship Diamond Princess in Yokohama at the time. According to our law, this is the responsibility of the state to evacuate Indonesian national in their situation, in a life-threatening situation. So according to that law, we have evacuate around 306 Indonesian national from Wuhan and Diamond Princess. Second, repatriation. As I mentioned earlier, one type of cases is many Indonesian migrant workers stranded overseas, and in this regard, we facilitate their repatriation to Indonesia. More than 27,000 Indonesian seafarers we have facilitating their repatriation to Indonesia. We also provide consular and legal assistance from Indonesian mission overseas to provide consular and legal assistance for migrant workers who are facing difficulties, especially for cases like termination of contract or unpaid wages. Logistical support, especially for staple food support, we also distribute this kind of support to our national who are affected by lockdown policy. Yeah, as mentioned before, this case mostly happened in Malaysia. Yeah, up until now, Malaysia still implement the lockdown policy, and we have many Indonesian undocumented living in Malaysia. So we provide logistical support for their livelihood. Up until now, more than 500,000 packages we have been distributed to Indonesian nationals. And then digital transformation. We establish a special feature. Our two digital platform from Indonesia, from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. First is Portal Peduli WNI. This is a web-based application, and Safe Travel. This is mobile application. So there are special feature of COVID-19 in those applications. This is to provide better access for our Indonesian national who have infected or affected by COVID-19 and also to seek information and seek assistance from Indonesian mission. We also be the co-sponsor for UN resolution on the protection of seafarers during COVID-19, and this resolution has been adopted by UN General Assembly last year. And lastly, we also provide protection for financial rights of migrant workers. As I mentioned earlier, that type of cases during the pandemic COVID, one of them is unpaid salaries. So during 2020, more than 140 billion rupees, have been secured. Financial right of migrant workers has been secure, and we have conveyed to our migrant workers. And lastly, this is my last slide. I would like to propose some strategy how we can provide better protection for migrant workers. First, about promoting policy coherence between sending countries and receiving countries. Why this is important? Because if we are to provide better protection for migrant workers, then we have to provide protection in all phases of migration, be it pre-departure, during employment, and after employment in destination countries. And in this regard, all stakeholders in receiving countries and sending countries should work together, should have a mutual commitment, and to create policy coherence. In this case, I would like to mention one of the example, like some destination countries implement the so-called Fisa Compression. This Fisa Compression allows the foreigners using tourist visa to be converted to working visa. This kind of policy create difficulties in sending countries like Indonesia, because if Indonesian migrant workers using tourist visa and then convert their tourist visa in a country of destination, they will not be registered in our database. And we cannot also ensure that they have received proper information, accurate information about safe migration and how Indonesian mission can provide protection from them. So this kind of policy should be discussed among sending countries and receiving countries. And according to our law, number 18, 2017, with regard to the protection of migrant workers, one of the responsibility of the state is to establish MOU, memorandum of understanding with the receiving countries. So this kind of MOU is one of the tools to promote policy coherence between Indonesia and the receiving countries. Second, public awareness campaign on safe migration. We are aware many of migrant workers of Indonesia going overseas through illegal channel. And these migrant workers are prone to be a victim of human trafficking. Middlemen, or Indonesia, we call it calo or sponsor, using deception and their bondage to encourage the candidate of migrant workers to go overseas for work. So in this regard, it is important for us to have a comprehensive public awareness campaign for all stakeholders, especially local government and also local communities, and most importantly, the family itself. So they have to be provided by accurate information about safe migration, how they can go overseas for working through legal channel. Thirdly, about promoting migrant workers' community participation at destination countries. I second the motion what Mbak Annie have said earlier, that it is important that the voices of migrant workers being heard, but not only being heard, but we also promote their active participation in providing protection among themselves. In this regard, like our Indonesian mission in Malaysia, for example, our embassy in Kuala Lumpur at that time, we promote the establishment of migrant workers community in Malaysia, especially from many regions, like in Madura. Madura is one of the region in East Java. They create ICMA, organization form for Madura migrant workers, and then the embassy provide support for them to establish this kind of organization, and then finally the embassy and the community hand in hand join working together to provide better protection, especially the community give us information, early information about the cases. Yeah. If the community provide us early information, then the embassy could provide better response to that cases. That's one of the example, the participation of community to provide better protection. And lastly, about the promoting multi-stakeholder cooperation, yeah, be it at national, regional, or multilateral level. We are of the view that this kind of challenges is very complex and enormous. Like I've mentioned earlier about our challenges, about the number of cases, about the difficulties about the database, and about how we provide better information for migrant workers. And this kind of challenges cannot be done alone by government. We need cooperation for all stakeholders, yeah, at national, regional, and multilateral level. And in this kind of dialogue, I think one of the example and a venue for us to have a better understanding about the role of each stakeholder for providing better protection. I think this and my presentation. Thank you, colleague. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Yuda. Thank you for your overview of responsibility of the government especially Indonesia as being major country of origin of a lot of migrant workers in the region, both Southeast Asia and East Asia. And also thank you for always coming to support, sit together with the civil society organizations and advocates in this conversation. And also I want to appreciate your address the issue of undocumented people, because there has been a comment about undocumented people, and I think we need to be very careful and mindful about talking about undocumented people, because a lot of time, as explained by Yuda clearly, especially during the COVID pandemic, a lot of people have lost their work permit, their visa, because of the situation, because of the regulations changes, and not because of their own fault. So thank you very much for raising that. I'm very sorry because we are running out of the time. We planned initially to invite everyone in the audience to join the panelists to have a discussion, but I think we don't have the time to do that. So I'm very sorry, but we tried to answer some of the questions that's been raised. And I was thinking about asking the opportunities for multi-stakeholder engagement from all the speakers, but I think you've also quite addressed them quite well. But if anyone from the panelists would like to comment after hearing other speakers, if there has been any opportunities that you have seen about collaborating from your perspective of yours, either from the civil society, from the businesses, from the media, from the government, I would quite like to hear from you. And also, I just want to start by asking Chloe, maybe if you can share with us about your plans, that how as a journalist, how you planning to kind of advocate for the rights of migrants in the project that you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Mariko. I noticed that there is a question sent to me about this topic also. So I may have to share slide again because I want everyone to see the picture. Yeah, so and then come here simply talk about the negative, but I do want to emphasize that there is still hope in Thailand. As everyone will know that Thailand has recently experienced a lot, democratic wave that demand equal rights in practically every socio-economic dimensions, including labor rights. And what surprised me is that, unlike their elder, but these younger activists and demonstrators, they did not to speak out on migrants' rights and confirming that equal rights of both migrants and Thais are essential. I think it's because, younger generation of Thai kind of regard themselves as global citizens, and knowing that one day they can be migrant in other country too. That's why the situation is getting better. I mean, even in Thai, we still have demonstration on labor rights, but it's not about Thai labor rights anymore. It's about all worker rights regardless of nationality. And this is another thing that's happening in COVID-19. During the COVID-19 crisis, there was a group of people start from a group named No One Care. As you can see, No One Care Bangkok, that's the name of their page. This group look after the migrants worker in construction sites who were ignored by both the government and the employer. And they create a social media network. I mean, this project is only initiated by a group of one or two person, and then it's go in social media, and then everyone come and they would instruct people to go survey around their home, that if there are a construction site that there is a migrants left behind in that site or not, and start helping to pin up the location, so that if someone is available, they can go and bring food or bring medicine to migrants worker that are left behind. They did not do this to collect merit in terms of Buddhist descent, but instead they declare clearly that they only did it because the state and employer have abandoned these migrants and they can't bear it any longer. So they also demand that the government be in charge for looking after the employee, and their demand sadly has never been mentioned by the authority. But the foundation of this group is mean that more and more people, I mean, the migrants in Thailand are not alone anymore. There are people that try to check whether they are all right or not, and trying to help, and also demand for structural change toward the government. This is my ongoing project that helps me discover that a very growing number of younger journalists are interested in reports on migrant rights. This project is funded by the USAID, and the USAID funds my news outlet and Love Funky. There is a social enterprise named Love Funky, and they get funds by USAID, and they ask to collaborate with my new outlets in order to provide a media training on how to report on migrant rights properly, without adding bias, without adding the discourses that many bodies try to influence over the media discourse, and yeah, so we teach younger journalists to look from the inside of the migrants and report and in the same time respect their human rights and look at them like an individual, like a global citizen. And what surprised me is that this project received 150 applications from younger journalists. That surprised me a lot, but very sadly we have to select only 40 people in order to form a group and continue in the project. But the number it surprised me because it's only 3 years that I first being in this field of journalistic field. And at first, I think that not so many journalists interested about migrant issue. But after 3 years has passed and there is a democratic wave, people start to change their perspective. Right now, I got application more than hundreds of younger journalists that they want to be trained in order to report about migrants' life. So it's a 4-week program, and they will deliver the finding on tomorrow, the Saturday of this week. And I discovered that these younger journalists are more interested in reporting on not only they interested, but they also interest it in a deeper topic of immigration, such as the story of migrants' children, their education, or maybe migration and gender, and so on. So this is something that really surprised me, and sparks some hope that maybe if we create more and more journalists, the younger one that eager to report on immigration rights, maybe the voice of migrants may be emphasized and can shake the structural decision as somehow. And finally, I want to share with you what still prevents Thai media from covering migrant issue. First, of course, there are, as I described earlier, it is more common among other and traditional journalists that has personal bias. However, this pattern is beginning to disappear as I have described also, that the younger generation, they has been grown up with globalization and view themselves as global citizens. This younger generation is subsiding the older generation, and this personal bias, I believe that someday it will disappear. And with the work that we are trying to do with training and shaping the attitude, positive attitude towards migrants to news journalists. And second is about resource. Well, it's obvious that news regarding immigrants or immigration will not generate, a lot of interest or engagement or appeal to advertiser. So consequently, despite a journalist decide to report on the subject, he or she must devote time or resource to other issues that will guarantee the audience engagement as well. And not only labor journalists that face this challenge, but I have a really interesting model. In Thailand, environmental journalists have already faced similar issue also, and they form a club in order to share among journalists information and resources on the issue that they cover. In that term, is that environmental. And by forming a club, it is ensure that the topic will be covered in wide range of media. I mean, not only newspaper, not only online outlets, but also if in the club there is a broadcast journalist, it would also be covered in broadcasting media also. So I think forming, a Thai or national labor journalist group is also a wonderful idea. As a result, so that we will be able to share information, share resource to report more efficiently. Finally, there's the big issue of censorship. So I believe, like many countries, power and capital are so concentrated in Thailand that major media companies must operate under the shades of some kind of elite network that is very, very big, very vast. So it's so usual for us to report something about a large evil company mistreats their employee. And after that, we would receive a mysterious phone call from someone. And that's enough if a journalist is not have enough support from their counterpart or from the news outlet, with most news outlet doesn't support journalists to do that. Is this enough for a journalist to stop reporting on that thing? So I must confess that I'm still confused how to tackle this issue, but I think that the cooperation of every stakeholder that take place, maybe the NGO that can push together in order to change the decision of the people with power somehow. So I believe that it might change.
Thank you, Ploys. That's very good to hear about the journalist club and sharing resources and tackle the challenges together. Sorry, I'm just gonna have like one last kind of question, because I'm looking at other questions coming in, and I see there are quite a lot of questions around the recruitment agencies and also the cooperation between the countries of origin and destination. So I would like to ask maybe Yuda and Junko-san about the kind of just quick response to the recruitment agency, how they come about within your work, and also maybe to BENI about the cooperation between countries of origin and destinations from migrant workers organizations' point of view. Just as a last point, just kind of summarizing a lot of questions. Sorry, we didn't have time to answer all.
So can I go first?
Yeah. Okay. Please Jinko.
Okay, thank you very much. So I know it's a very complicated matter regarding recruitment agency matters, and we Japanese people also have a massive problem about it. So basically, a company should, as I said, the company has an obligation and responsibility to look into whole supply chain and make sure that there is no illegal practice anywhere on the supply chain. So firstly, they have to trace one by one and where in the supply chain, what kind of recruiters and what kind of brokers are existing on the supply chain. And if they find any illegal practice, they have to eliminate it. But in order to do so, we have to collaborate with local government as well, because if we eliminate just one illegal recruit, it's not meaningful. I mean, we have to eliminate all illegal practice, and all illegal brokers, all illegal agent in collaboration with other actors, mainly here in local government. And in order for company to make take that kind of action, as I said, multi-stakeholder engagement is very key. We have to work together with civil society and media and also investors. As a lawyer, I'm trying to put Japanese companies to make a decision and just take an action in terms of these issues as well. But they, how do you say, they take into consideration what kind of things other international actors are saying about their practice. So we have to work together, and we really have to take an advantage of international pressure as well. So here we have to be very strategic about it to make the behavior of companies. So there is no silver bullet, and we can't change everything overnight, but we have to do that like that one by one. I hope this answers to your question to some extent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mariko. I would like to respond to your question about the role of recruitment agencies. In my point of view, that we cannot ignore the important role of recruitment agencies, because what happened on the ground, the recruitment agencies is needed. Is needed to facilitate the migration of migrant workers from sending countries to receiving countries. And in this regard, in the context of multi-dialogue stakeholders, we encourage the recruitment agencies, especially the association of recruitment agencies, to create the so-called ethical recruitment procedure. I think this is one of the recommendation of the Global Compact on Migration. So the association itself, should create ethical procedure to recruit the candidate for migrant workers, because we sometimes see how the recruitment agencies didn't give accurate information about what will happen in the country of receiving country, and also didn't provide accurate information about what kind of jobs, what kind of responsibilities that have to be performed by migrant workers. Many of the cases, the recruitment agencies giving a false hope about the salary, about the job itself, and then when the migrant workers have to face different reality in the country of destination, then they will face problem there. In our database, one of the cases that mostly happen in domestic migrant workers is abscondment. Yeah. They are leaving their employment. Employment. Yeah. We believe that one of the cause of this kind of problem is because the migrant workers find itself being the victim of deception. Yeah, because what has been explained by the recruitment agencies before they go to a country of destination is different from what they have to face. Yeah. This kind of solution I propose, which is the ethical recruitment procedure. And secondly, of course, the role of government here is very critical to monitor. Yeah, to monitor the recruitment agencies to follow the regulation, the regulation about the recruitment agencies. I think that's two proposal that I would like to suggest.
Thank you very much. Any maybe about the cooperation between country of origin and destination?
I think one of the key that we learn for the advocacy, there is really a need for cross-border cooperation. There is no way for the migrant to even doing advocate on our own, even at national level, without like regional pressure, even cross-border pressure. It is very hard to win a little bit, benefit from the local government. For example, wage increase, benefit during the pandemic. So we actually recognize the very reason why we form IMA is because of that cross-border strategy that we think has been very, very vital to the future advocacy of migrants, locally, regionally, internationally. And now, as for now, the migrants, as in practice or in experience, many of the migrants, Bangladesh overseas, are actually connected to the NGOs like grassroots organizations, even in Bangladesh. Indonesian migrant overseas are also connected with our fellow partner in Indonesia, and so forth and so forth. So I think that kind of partnership is already existing. The only question is how we are going to advance that, because our colleagues back home are not up to date into the current situation of migrants. There is really a need to create this kind of a national, like nationality-based, but actually cross-border organization. For example, Indonesian migrants, but covering migrants in different countries. That kind of platform will provide us the synergy on how to align where we are now in terms of issues, priority. And when it comes to our national government, what should we advocate collectively? I think that kind of strategy that we are trying to promote within Asia. So we are also helping our Bangladeshi migrants, for example, to be connected, whether they are in Middle East, whether they are in Southeast Asia, Southeast Asia, and also in East Asia, to be connected with our members in Bangladesh. So I think that kind of synergy. But of course, the role of, for example, a human rights working group, for example, is very, very key to this. We cannot have easy access to the government. That's one thing for sure. I always contact Daniel, like, can you please connect us to this government, that government, simply because we are not dealing with government all the time, and yet we are far away. So I think that kind of facilitation, even this kind of dialogue between grassroots migrants, NGO, academe, and government, it will be very, very important. And I think you guys have that kind of, a key role in terms of facilitation and fostering the cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you all the panelists. And I'm sorry that I couldn't manage the time very well and it's kind of a bit rushing at the end. But thank you so much. It's very, very informative. And just very, very lastly, because this is a part of the cross-regional advocacy building youth academy, we will have a lot of discussion next 2 days. There was a question for you that we are doing cross-regional advocacy in what platform, what international platform that we should target in this advocacy? Is it ASEAN +3 or GCM, or is there any suggestion from your point of view from the government?
Yeah, in my perspective, all the platform is important. Yeah, is important. Be it ASEAN level, multilateral level, yeah, especially bilateral level. But at the end of the day, yeah, in my point of view, the regional platform and the multilateral platform is supporting for creating bilateral, yeah, bilateral cooperation. As I mentioned in my proposal, the importance of policy coherence. Policy coherence is between the country of destination and the sending countries. So, how we could promote the role of regional mechanism and the multilateral mechanism to create enabling environment for bilateral cooperation? Because at the end of the day, what works on the ground is mutual understanding in the form of MOU between Indonesia and sending countries and the receiving countries. That's what bind the receiving countries and the country of sending countries. I mean, so how those platform, regional and multilateral level, could boost or could encourage the two sending and receiving countries come together and create better governance for migrant workers.
Thank you very much. Thank you again, all the panelists. And this is probably the end of the panel discussion, but I would hand over to Daniel just to close the session.
Thank you so much, Mariko. You have been successfully leading this multi-stakeholder dialogue. Thank you so much also all speakers, Eni Lestari, Ploy, Junka, Watanabe-san, Pak Yuda. You are all prominent speaker with your expertise, and of course, in this occasion, I'd like to also thanks to everybody who worked to make this event successful, to preparing this event, especially Icha, Indah, Dito, and Jess, and also MC Anna. And also, I'd like to thank especially to the Sasakoapis Foundation, represented by Mr. Isu Adasisan, Yui Fumiko Selo, and also Sanai-san, because of their generous support, make this better engagement between East and Southeast Asia becoming more stronger. This discussion has been highlighted that we are here because we have one common struggle to ensure better protection and welfare of a migrant worker and their family. As a civil society in the Human Rights Working Group, we felt that we, even as an NGO, felt left behind, especially on the process of the development of MOU, as mentioned lastly by Pak Yuda. It's very interesting to really, at the end, we look at that's really operating in the field is understanding between sending and receiving country. We also left behind. We are also lacking in this discussion and the development of the MOU. So in this regard, this how to call that event really important that we all here trying to get to understand each other, both challenges faced by multi-stakeholder. By the business, we learned from Jinko recently, where somehow it's difficult to deal with the business actor on how to understand about to work with the civil society, while knowing the nature of civil society are more quote unquote maybe aggressive somehow, and of course from the journalist perspective, as well as from any. I always learn a lot. I'm big fans of you, Annie. We learned that we don't talk about migrant worker without migrant worker involvement. So by this, I think I'd like to end this discussion. It is also part of the BBC Youth Academy on Migrants. Let us work further to put out our utmost effort to really supporting the agenda to better protection of the rights of migrant workers and their family. Stay healthy, everyone, and see you again. And thank you
so much for the interpreter for
thank you for the interpreter too. Yeah.
Over 2 hours. So thank you very much. Anna.
Yes, thank you. And also, please don't forget to keep in touch with us. Here is our contact details. Follow us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at bbc.org. And you can find our website, bbc.org. And you can email us at bbc.org@gmail.com. So thank you, everyone. And here is the contact details for HRWG.
And now you wanted to take a
See you
picture?
again.
Yeah, let's have a picture first.
Oh yeah, let's have a picture among panels, panelists.
For those who are comfortable to open their cameras, please open it. And
thank you, Anna.
flash your brightest smile. Ready? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Smile. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jinko Watanabe-san.
Thank you, Mariko.
Thank you very much, Papa. Thank you, Lenny.
Thank you.